When you look at a world map, you see all the individual countries, right? All those familiar borders. But what if I told you that map is, right now, being totally redrawn? Not by armies, but by countries teaming up, creating these massive economic blocks that are literally changing how business gets done on a global scale. So today, we're going to dive into how these power teams are formed, why they matter so much, and what it all means for, well, all of us. And honestly, there is no better place to start this story than with one of the most ambitious projects happening anywhere on the planet right now: the incredible effort to forge a single unified market across the entire continent of Africa. Just look at this. This was back in 2018. Leaders from 54 of Africa's 55 nations came together to launch what's called the African Continental Free Trade Area, or the AFCFTA. Now, this was not just another piece of paper. This was a pledge to create the largest free trade area in the world by population. Just think about that. I mean, the scale is just mind-boggling. We're talking about a single market that's designed to bring together 1.3 billion people. And all told, that represents a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. This is, without a doubt, an economic powerhouse in the making. But, beyond those massive numbers, the real story here is the human one. The World Bank figures that if this thing works, it could pull 40 million people out of extreme poverty. I mean, this isn't just about economics. It's a project that could fundamentally change millions of lives for the better. So what are the real-world problems they're trying to fix? Well, the World Bank painted a perfect picture of it. Imagine you're running a business, right? And you're just stuck in these endless lines at the border, buried in duplicate paperwork, and dealing with officials asking for, side payments to get things moving. These are the kinds of frustrating daily roadblocks that have held back growth for so long. And this chart right here, this chart shows you exactly why this is such a huge deal. Right now, only about 16% of trade in Africa happens between African countries. Just 16%. Now look at Asia, that number is 60%. Europe, almost 70%. You can just see the enormous untapped potential for growth that exists right there on the continent. But let's be super clear. While the AFCFTA is absolutely historic, this whole idea of countries teaming up, it's happening all over the world. This is a global trend. And it's not some small niche trend either. By 2022, there were 355 of these regional agreements up and running. So you might be asking, why do this instead of making one big global deal? Well, a big part of it is that negotiating through the World Trade Organization, which has 164 members, can be painfully slow. A lot of countries are figuring out it's just faster and easier to make deals with their neighbors. Okay, but here's the thing. Not all of these blocks are the same. Not even close. You can think of it like a ladder of economic integration, where each step you take up represents a much, much deeper commitment between the countries. This diagram is basically our roadmap for the next few minutes. It lays out the whole thing perfectly. Think of it as a series of circles, and as you move toward the center, the connections get tighter and more complex. So let's start with that first outermost ring, the free trade area. All right, level 1, the free trade area. This is the most common kind of block you'll see. The idea is really simple. All the countries inside the group agree to get rid of taxes and tariffs on each other's stuff. But, and this is the key, each country still gets to make its own rules for trading with anyone outside the club. A perfect example is the trade deal between the US, Mexico, and Canada. Now let's take it one step deeper. Level 2 is the customs union. It's got everything a free trade area has, but with one major addition. Now, the whole group acts as a single unit when trading with the rest of the world. They all agree on one common set of rules and tariffs for any country that's not in the bloc. Next up, level 3, the common market. And this is where things start to get really connected. So on top of the free trade and the common external policy, you add free movement of the factors of production. Now, that's just a fancy economic term for two basic things: people and money. It means workers can move to any member country for a job, and investment capital can flow across borders with no restrictions. Okay, level 4 is the economic union, and this is a huge leap. You take everything from a common market, and then you add a shared currency, you coordinate your tax policies, and you create one single monetary policy to manage the whole thing. The European Union, with its euro, is the most famous example of this in the world by far. And that's just a fancy economic term for two basic things: people and money. It means workers can move to any member country for a job, and investment capital can flow across borders with no restrictions. Okay, level 5 is the economic market. And you create one single monetary policy to manage the whole thing. The European Union, with its euro, is the most famous example of this in the world by far. And that brings us to the final, deepest level of integration, the political union. At this stage, you have a central political body that starts coordinating not just economic policy, but social and even foreign policy for all the member countries. The states essentially start acting like one unified nation. It's the ultimate endgame, and while no one is fully there yet, you can certainly see the EU continuing to take steps in this direction. So we've seen what these blocks are, from the simplest to the most complex. But that begs the big question, right? Why even do this? Why would any country choose to give up some of its independence to join one of these clubs? Let's look at the arguments for it. It really comes down to three main payoffs. First, the economic gains. Free trade lets countries focus on what they do best, which makes everyone more efficient and helps the whole region grow. Second, there are political gains. When your economies are all tangled up together, you have a huge incentive to cooperate and, not fight with each other. And finally, there's global clout. As a unified bloc, these countries have way more power and a much louder voice on the world stage. There's this old joke in Europe that really nails the political side of things. It goes that the EU should put up a statue of Joseph Stalin. Why? Because without the shared threat of the Soviet Union looming over them, the fiercely independent nations of Western Europe may never have found the motivation to work together so closely. It's a dark joke, but it makes the point. But it's never that simple, is it? This kind of integration isn't some magic fix for everything. There are very real costs and serious risks involved. It is definitely not a win-win for everyone inside these countries. And this is probably the biggest cost. Even if a country benefits overall, certain groups of people can get hit, and hit hard. A classic example is what happened after NAFTA was signed. Some manufacturing workers in the US and Canada lost their jobs because their companies moved factories to Mexico, where labor was cheaper. The country as a whole may have gained, but for those workers, it was a definite loss. This brings us to a really critical economic idea. Do these blocks actually make the world more efficient? It all comes down to two concepts: trade creation and trade diversion. Trade creation, on the left, that's the good stuff. Let's say your country makes expensive shirts, but your new partner in the bloc makes them cheap. You stop making them and buy the cheap ones from your partner. That's a win. But then there's the dark side, trade diversion. What if the cheapest shirts in the entire world are made by a country outside your bloc? But because of your new rules, their shirts now have a high tax on them. So you end up buying more expensive shirts from your partner inside the bloc. In that case, you've actually made things less efficient. And all of these pros and cons, it leaves us with a massive question for the future. As our world keeps reorganizing itself into these powerful economic teams, are we building bridges toward greater global cooperation, or are we accidentally building walls for a new kind of rivalry, one fought between a handful of giant competing blocs? It's definitely something to think about.